A drug exists that can make you hand over your own bank password with a smile on your face, and you'd never remember doing it. You assume danger always announces itself as a needle, a warning label, a bad feeling. Some of the strangest substances in history prove that assumption wrong in the worst ways. Scopolamine, in parts of South America, this drug earned the nickname Devil's Breath for a reason. Criminals learned they could blow it as a powder into someone's face and take control of their will within minutes. Scopolamine blocks acetylcholine, a chemical your brain uses to form memories and stay alert, which leaves victims conscious, compliant, and unable to recall what happened afterward. You don't pass out. You just stop being able to say no, and stop being able to remember agreeing to anything. Here's the thing that makes it terrifying. Victims often calmly hand over passwords, empty their own accounts, and let strangers into their homes, looking completely normal to anyone watching. Law enforcement across multiple countries has documented cases exactly like this. It leaves no struggle, no bruises, no memory, just an empty account and a blank stretch of time. Krokodil. In the 2000s, Russian users looking for a cheap heroin substitute started cooking a homemade opioid from over-the-counter ingredients. It worked fast and cost almost nothing. The nickname came from what it did to the skin. The chemical process to make it left behind toxic byproducts, and injecting those impurities damaged blood vessels and tissue around the injection site, causing skin to turn scaly, green, and necrotic. Your body doesn't just get high. It starts dying in patches, from the outside in. Here's the part most people don't sit with. Users often knew exactly what it was doing to them, and kept using it anyway, because withdrawal felt worse than watching their own skin rot. Average life expectancy after starting use was reported at under 3 years in some regions. It offered a cheaper high. It charged the price in flesh. Bromo-DragonFLY chemists designed this synthetic compound in a lab, and it turned out to be one of the most potent hallucinogens ever created active in doses smaller than a grain of sand. Bromo-DragonFLY binds tightly to serotonin receptors and stays attached far longer than typical hallucinogens, stretching what should be hours of effects into days. Its structure also constricts blood vessels aggressively, which is where the real danger hides. Reduced blood flow to fingers, toes, and limbs has led to amputations. Here's the thing, because it's so potent, the difference between a normal dose and a life-threatening one is almost impossibly small. And because it was designed to skirt drug laws, users often had no idea what concentration they were actually taking. Several documented deaths trace back to accidental overdose from this margin of error problem. It promised days of altered reality. It sometimes cost people their limbs. Flakka. Around 2010, this cheap synthetic stimulant started showing up in Florida, sold for a few dollars a dose. Users called the crash it caused excited delirium, and the name fit. Flakka floods your brain with dopamine and norepinephrine at extreme levels, spiking body temperature, heart rate, and paranoia all at once. Your nervous system essentially redlines, and unlike a controlled adrenaline spike, it doesn't know how to come back down safely. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. News reports from that era showed users with superhuman-seeming strength, tearing off clothing, running into traffic, convinced they were being chased. That wasn't an exaggeration. Extreme hyperthermia and psychosis genuinely produce behavior that looks inhuman. Emergency rooms in South Florida reported a sharp spike in cases directly tied to this drug within a 2-year window. It costs less than a coffee. It sometimes costs people their sanity for hours. Datura, long before synthetic drugs existed, indigenous cultures across the Americas used this wild plant in sacred rituals, believing it opened a doorway to the spirit world. Modern teenagers have rediscovered it looking for a legal high. Datura contains compounds that block acetylcholine throughout your entire nervous system, causing intense hallucinations that don't feel like hallucinations. Users often can't distinguish what's real from what isn't, holding full conversations with people who aren't there. Here's the thing. Most people don't realize the gap between a ritual dose and a fatal dose is razor thin. And unlike most hallucinogens, Datura causes genuine delirium, not just altered perception. Users have walked into traffic, convinced they were somewhere else entirely. Poison control centers still field dozens of emergency calls involving this plant every year. It offered a doorway to another world. Some who walked through never fully came back. Etorphine, M99. Veterinarians developed this compound to tranquilize elephants and rhinos, animals weighing thousands of pounds. It's roughly 1,000 times more potent than morphine, built for bodies far larger than yours. Etorphine binds so aggressively to opioid receptors that even a droplet absorbed through skin can stop human breathing within minutes. Vets who use it carry the overdose antidote strapped to their body at all times, because a single accidental splash can be fatal before help arrives. Here's the thing that reveals how extreme this substance is. It was never designed with human safety margins in mind at all. There isn't a safe recreational dose, because it was never built to be one. It's occasionally surfaced in poaching and criminal contexts specifically because of that overwhelming potency. It was built to drop an elephant in seconds. It can do the same to you. DiPT. In the 1990s, a chemist synthesizing novel tryptamines created a compound with a genuinely bizarre effect. It barely alters what you see, but completely warps what you hear. DiPT interacts with serotonin receptors in a way that specifically distorts auditory processing, dropping pitches, smearing voices, and making familiar sounds feel alien, while leaving vision almost untouched. Your ears essentially stop trusting your brain's usual translation of sound into meaning. Here's the part that surprises people, because it doesn't cause typical visual hallucinations. Some users mistakenly assumed it was milder than other psychedelics, when in reality the auditory distortion made basic functioning, like understanding speech, nearly impossible for hours. Very little long-term research exists, since it never gained mainstream use. It promised a different kind of trip. It rewired the one sense you trust most, without asking. DNP. In the 1930s, this industrial chemical got repackaged as a miracle weight loss pill, sold to people desperate to shed pounds fast. It worked disturbingly well, which was exactly the problem. DNP forces your cell's mitochondria to burn energy without producing useful output, converting nearly all of it directly into heat instead. Your metabolism doesn't just speed up. Your body starts cooking itself from the inside, with no way to shut the reaction off once it starts. Here's the thing regulators didn't grasp fast enough. There's no safe margin between losing weight and fatal hyperthermia, because the mechanism causing weight loss and the mechanism causing death are the exact same process, just at different intensities. It was pulled from the market in 1938, and yet it still resurfaces in bodybuilding and diet circles today. It promised effortless weight loss. It sometimes delivered a body temperature no one survives. Jenkem. In the early 2000s, a story spread online, claiming impoverished children in African slums were inhaling gas from fermented sewage to get high, calling it Jenkem. News outlets ran with it, and panic followed. The supposed mechanism was fermentation gas methane and hydrogen sulfide producing a euphoric high when inhaled. In reality, no verified case of actual Jenkem use was ever confirmed, and the chemistry itself doesn't support the claims. Sewage gas is toxic, not intoxicating, in any documented sense. Here's the part that matters more than the drug itself. American teenagers, inspired purely by internet rumors, actually attempted to recreate it, resulting in real poisonings from a drug that likely never existed as described in the first place. It became a lesson in how fear spreads faster than fact-checking. It promised a bizarre high. It delivered a hoax that hurt people who believed it. Carfentanil, developed as a tranquilizer for elephants, is roughly 10,000 times more potent than morphine. It was never intended to come anywhere near a human body in any dose. Carfentanil binds to opioid receptors with such overwhelming strength that a few salt grain-sized particles can trigger fatal respiratory failure through skin contact or accidental inhalation. First responders handling suspected exposure now wear hazmat-level protection, treating it less like a drug and more like a chemical weapon. Here's the thing most people don't know. It started showing up mixed into street heroin and counterfeit pills, meaning users overdosing on it often had no idea they'd taken it at all, let alone in a dose built for a 2-ton animal. Multiple mass overdose events across North America have been traced directly back to it. It was built for elephants. It's now quietly killing people who never knew it was there. Adrenochrome pop culture and internet conspiracy theories have painted this compound as an extreme, forcibly harvested psychedelic that grants euphoria or even immortality. The real science tells a much less dramatic story. Adrenochrome is simply a chemical produced when adrenaline breaks down through oxidation, something your own body creates naturally in tiny amounts. In the 1950s, some researchers speculated it might play a role in schizophrenia symptoms, but that theory was never solidly confirmed and mostly faded from serious science decades ago. Here's the thing worth sitting with. Despite having no verified significant psychoactive effect at natural doses, adrenochrome exploded into modern conspiracy culture, often tied to disturbing and false claims that have caused real-world harm and harassment toward innocent people. The gap between the myth and biochemistry could not be wider. It became a legend built on fear. The actual chemistry never earned the reputation. Nutmeg, high dose. Sitting in almost every kitchen spice rack, nutmeg seems as harmless as cinnamon. In large enough quantities, it becomes a genuine, dangerous hallucinogen, and people have discovered this the hard way for centuries.